It's good to see you all. We're thankful that you're here. Really excited about we're excited about you returning students, obviously, but we're also excited about new students. And I'm excited about getting to know you and hopefully as time goes on, getting your name on a list where we can be sending you out to do some fill-in preaching and things like that. We do a lot of that out of our office in Advancement. It is about fundraising, but it's very relational with the churches. And so I hope you'll want to get involved in that and looking forward to working with you in that way. You are going to hear three important chapel messages this week. I'm privileged to lead off, but really the only reason I'm leading off is because I'm traveling Wednesday and Thursday in Advancement. You stay on the road a lot, and so I will miss Pat's message and I'll miss Bill's message. But if they're recorded, and I think they will be, I'm going to be looking forward to going back and hearing them. So everything this week's going to be important. All of us on the HCU team, we want you to be successful. Everything about your experience here, from what you do in the classroom to what you learn outside the classroom, we're trying to position you for success. And Proverbs chapter 22, verse 29 says, "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men." And we're going to come back and talk about that a little bit. It's a time of new beginnings, and as humans, we are wired to enjoy new beginnings. We like New Year's Day because there are New Year's resolutions. New beginnings, it's a new school year. If you're a returning student, hey, there's some things I can do this year maybe that I did better than I did last year, things like that. And so here's my big idea. Here's what I want you to walk out of here thinking about when you leave chapel today. I want us to be a group of people who embrace excellence in everything we do. And that's, some days that's easy, but some days that's not easy. And I want us to be the kind of people who embrace that on the days that it's easy and the days when it's not as easy as we'd like us to be. Now, to get us started, I want to go back to 1899, going back a long way, and do a little bit of history. There was a guy named Elbert Hubbard. He was a magazine editor. And he wrote an article entitled "A Message to Garcia." Some of you have likely heard of this little message. It was penned during what you might call a less politically correct time, where if you needed to say something, you just said it however you needed to say it, and you'll see some of that in what we're going to share. But this got inserted into his magazine without even a title, but it was so well received that it has become one of the most published articles of all time. And he writes about a mindset that I believe any Jesus follower would want to embrace. He writes about a mindset that seemingly anyone who wants to do well in life would want to embrace. And I think this also includes an approach that, hey, if I am a student and I'm preparing myself for service in the kingdom, I'm preparing myself for ministry, this is the kind of mindset that you'd want to have. Now, let me do a little bit of background for you to set this up. Content of the article. Here's the history, and Brad and Wayne will correct me if I get it wrong, but 1895, Spain invades and begins oppressing Cuba. Then in 1897, the U.S. comes in and puts a battleship in the harbor in Havana to make sure that they understand that we have an eye on what's going on. In early 1898, there's an explosion in the Havana harbor, and the U.S. Maine sinks, and that is what instigates the Spanish-American War. Now, President McKinley, as he's getting ready to declare war, he hasn't done that yet, but he realizes that if he wants to be effective and if he wants to be successful, he really needs the help of the Cuban army. And the problem is Garcia is the leader of the Cuban army, but Garcia is hidden away in the jungles of Cuba. Spain has been looking for this guy. They can't find him. And so he calls and he talks to his head of military intelligence, and he says, how can we get a message to this guy Garcia? And the head of military intelligence, he says, there's one guy. If anybody can get a message to Garcia, this one guy, Andrew Summers Rowan, if anybody can do it, this guy can do it. So they bring Rowan in, they give him the assignment, Rowan leaves. 3 weeks later, he comes back with Garcia's reply. Spain is defeated, and many felt that Garcia, the leader of the Cuban army, was a key to the victory. And in fact, I'm told that if you go to Cuba, they've actually set up a monument there. They've written history to reflect that it's all about Garcia, which makes sense if it's your country. So a year later, in 1899, Hubbard and his son, they're discussing the war, and they're discussing the heroes, and they're discussing why things went well. And Hubbard's son said, I don't really think Garcia was the true hero of this war. I believe the true hero of the war was Rowan, because it was Rowan who went into the jungle and got the message to Garcia in the first place. In other words, Andrew Summers Rowan facilitated the success. And it's one of those moments, if you already preach, maybe you hear an idea and you capture it right now, it sparks you to write a sermon right now. Well, for Hubbard, as soon as he heard that, he ran to his desk and he starts penning this little article called A Message to Garcia. And as I read I'm not reading it all, you can go online and find it, but as I read some of these excerpts, I want you to think in terms about how some of these principles could apply today, and then think in terms of the fact that, hey, while this is dated in some of the words that are used, in a lot of ways this needs to still be written and listened to and applied today. And so this is some from A Message to Garcia. When war broke out between Spain and the United States, it was very necessary to communicate quickly with the leader of the insurgents. Garcia was somewhere in the mountain fastnesses of Cuba. No one knew where. No mail or telegraph could reach him. The president must secure his cooperation, and quickly. What to do? Someone said to the president, "There's a fellow by the name of Rowan who will find Garcia for you if anybody can." Rowan was sent for and given a letter to be delivered to Garcia. How the fellow by the name of Rowan took the letter, sealed it up in an oilskin pouch, strapped it over his heart, in 4 days landed by night off the coast of Cuba from an open boat, disappeared into the jungle, and in 3 weeks came out on the other side of the island, having traversed a hostile country on foot and having delivered his letter to Garcia, are things I have no special desire now to tell in detail. The point I wish to make is this. McKinley gave Rowan a letter to be delivered to Garcia. Rowan took the letter and did not ask, "Where is he at?" By the eternal, there is a man whose form should be cast in deathless bronze and the statue placed in every college in the land. It is not book learning young men need, nor instruction about this or that, but a stiffening of the vertebrae which will cause them to be loyal to a trust, to act promptly, concentrate their energies, do the thing, carry a message to Garcia. Now don't panic. This isn't a little message about disrespecting higher education. You are here for higher education. Higher education is important. Higher education is needed. You need to learn some things. But Hubbard was not disrespecting higher education either. He was trying to make a point. Did you notice that phrase, a stiffening of the vertebrae, which will cause them to be loyal to a trust? I want to stop on that for just a minute. He's emphasizing the determination that you and I need to get the job done, to do one's best, to embrace excellence. For us as administrators, for teachers, for students, especially since that's kind of what we're emphasizing today. When you think about being loyal to a trust, what are some areas where you've got to be loyal to a trust? What would you place as most important? This is where we can do give and take. Loyal to a trust. What's most important, number one? God. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. I thought I was going to have to drag that out, but we are Christians. We've surrendered our lives. We're Jesus followers. So number one, we are loyal to that trust. That is the most important thing. But then there are some other ones. Does anyone want to throw some others on the table? I've got a list that I'm going to get through, but if you want to share first, I want you to do that. How many of, well, you don't have to raise your hands, but some of you, and one thing that encouraged us this year during Heritage Connect and as we were gearing up, a number of you had your parents arrive with you, and they're interested in what you're here to do. When your parents have involvement in your education, in one sense, being loyal to a trust, do you need to be thinking about them in some way, and if so, why? You know, when I went to school the first time, as a traditional age student, my mom and dad, they kind of said, "You are on the 4-year plan. You know, we're here to get you in school for 4 years, and you better be efficient, you better get it done, because if you're going to go longer than 4 years, that's on you." Your parents are investing into you. And there have been a lot of students who have come through here, and they would give anything had they had parents who were investing in their lives. They may have already been a little bit older, or they were coming from homes where parents were disinterested, and they would have loved to have had parents invested into what they were doing. So if your parents are a part of your college experience, please be loyal to the trust, to the fact that they are investing in you. Some of you are already married. What about your spouse? Loyal to a trust. Obviously, if you're married, you've got a whole marriage thing there, but I'm talking about as a student. If you're a student right now and you're already married, does your spouse deserve something? Does your spouse deserve a certain level of you effort-wise and as far as your college education goes? And how many of you who are single hope to be married one day? It's okay to raise your hands on that. If you want to be single, be like Paul, more power to you. Most of us, you're going to find we want to be married. Do you think about your spouse, even though you may not know who that is right now? And do you think about your life right now and how you're living your life right now and how that may affect your marriage someday? Loyal to a trust. Ministry is not all about the money. But you are going to run your own business in one sense. When you're going into the ministry, you're going to go to work for a congregation, but in one sense, you have a business to run. You want to be as effective as possible in your business. And while it's not all about the money, guys in ministry who aspire to excellence, they don't have their families usually looking at them going, well, I wonder if the leader of our family is going to be able to find a job so that the leader of our family can put food on our table. Guys who aspire to excellence, their families generally aren't going to look at them with those kinds of questions. But that habit of aspiring to excellence, it starts now. Let me throw a couple of others on the table. What about those who support this university? I'm thankful Debbie's here. We've got one of our board members in the room today. People who support this university, when you come to school, in one sense, you're spending money that you have not earned. And so if you're spending money that you did not earn, people are saying, hey, we think it's important for students to have a scholarship. So somebody's donated some money so that your education can have some scholarship dollars behind it. You're spending money you did not earn. So loyal to a trust. Do you think about those people who are, on that day when I know I ought to be writing, I know I ought to be working, I know I ought to be getting that paper ready for class or whatever it is. Do you think about the fact a lot of people are investing into me? Or do you say, well, we'll get a little bit of that done later. I'm going to play right now. See, when you start thinking about excellence as your mindset, it'll affect the way you spend your time because you're spending time and then you're spending money that you did not earn. And then when you think about going to work, the Lord's church, you kind of become the face of the congregation that you go to work at. And so day in and day out, yes, you're representing Christ. But every time you interact with somebody on behalf of that congregation that you represent, you are representing every member in your church family. If it's a church of 25, you're representing all 25 of those people. If it's a church of 800, you're representing 800 people on a day-to-day basis. And so being loyal to a trust, I hope you walk out of here thinking about that. I want to talk a little bit more about going to work. Here's the second excerpt of this, and we're going to run just a little long today, and we'll try not to do that on a day-to-day basis, or they'll never let me speak in chapel again. But here's the second part. General Garcia is dead now, but there are other Garcias. No man who has endeavored to carry out an enterprise where many hands were needed, but has well been nigh appalled at times by the imbecility of the average man, the inability or unwillingness to concentrate on a thing and do it. Slipshod assistance, foolish inattention, dowdy indifference, and half-hearted work seem to be the rule. And no one succeeds unless by hook or crook or threat he forces or bribes other men to assist him. You, reader, put this matter to a test. You're sitting now in your office. 6 clerks are within your call. Summon anyone and make this request. Please look in the encyclopedia and make a brief memorandum for me concerning the life of Correggio. Will the clerk quietly say, yes, sir, and go do the task? On your life, he will not. He will look at you out of a fishy eye and ask one or more of the following questions. Who was he? Which encyclopedia? Where is the encyclopedia? Was I hired for that? Don't you mean Bismarck? What's the matter with Charlie doing it? Is he dead? Is there any hurry? Shan't I bring you the book and let you look it up yourself? What do you want to know for? And I'll lay you 10 to 1 that after you've answered the questions and explained how to find the information and why you want it, the clerk will go off and get one of the other clerks to help him find Garcia and then come back and tell you that no such man exists. Now, if you are wise, you will not bother to ask your assistant or explain to your assistant that Correggio is indexed under the C's, not in the K's, but you will smile sweetly and say, never mind, and go look it up yourself. We want you to embrace excellence as a student. Getting the job done, not procrastinating, playing when it's time to play, but getting the work done when it's time to work. Dressing a little better than we have in the past. We've tried to elevate that a little this school year. Why are we thinking about all these things? Why? School, the habits you form here are the habits that you will carry into the workplace, into the church that you go to work with at some point. And so let's think about that for a minute. For people who choose to embrace excellence as a standard for the way they do things, the sky's the limit. It happens in every walk of life, every career path. If you embrace excellence, sky's the limit. Think about working 40 hours a week, and most in ministry work more than that. 40 hours a week, 48 hours a week for about 45 years. That's 86,400 hours. That verse where we started, do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. Think about the original reader of a verse like that. It's about the idea that, hey, if you excel in your work, you're going to be a king through it's in your family. But if you want to max out your career, working for the king was about as high as you could go. You think about Joseph, second in command in all the land. Daniel chapter 6, verse 3. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. If you want to be excelling in your work, then you'll stand before kings. You can max your career out, in other words. I talked to plenty of business owners today who they struggle to find people to go to work for them that they can trust and who will show up for work and who will do work well. And you're going to preach to people in churches who they're struggling to find people like that. And then I talk to elders, and sometimes they lament non-excellent decisions that have been made by preachers that have been working with their congregation. And we're all going to make our mistakes because we're all human, but what we want to do, if we're thinking excellence, if that's who we are, we're going to minimize those times when people look at us and say, wow, that was a really bad decision. And that's what we want to do. We want to be excellent as often as we possibly can. And I love the fact, the reading that Josh shared with us, what Paul does in Colossians is he brings God into the mix regarding the way we do our work. Slaves, some translations, servants, in all things obey those who are your masters on earth, not with external service, as those who are there merely to please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. See, Paul makes God the reason to embrace excellence. And that's pretty big. That's pretty important. And that ought to apply to any work we go do. Some of you will end up being bivocational. You'll have a job by day and you'll also work with the church. Well, we need to embrace excellence in all of that. Paul makes it about representation. Motivational speaker Mark Gorman, he was telling a story, and he'd walked through his business, and one of his employees was stacking boxes, but the boxes were being stacked in a very, very sloppy way. And so Gorman said to his employee, you know, if you're going to do that job, if you're going to stack those boxes, stack them with excellence. And the employee said to Gorman, he said, but I'm not like you. And Gorman said to the employee, but you represent me. And the employee again said to Gorman, but I'm not like you. And then Gorman said, change. You've got 5 minutes. Who do we represent? We let off the most important trust that we're loyal to is the idea that we're Jesus followers. We're Christians. We embrace excellence because what we represent is not really just about us. And the work that you're going to do, it's about turning people from darkness to light. Let me give you the last excerpt and we'll be done. We've recently been hearing much maudlin sympathy expressed for the downtrodden denizen of the sweatshop and the homeless wanderer searching for honest employment, and with it all often go many hard words for the men in power. Nothing is said about the employer who grows old before his time in a vain attempt to get frowsy ne'er-do-wells to do intelligent work, and his long patient striving with help that does nothing but loaf when his back is turned. In every store and factory there is a constant weeding out process going on. The employer is constantly sending away help that have shown their incapacity to further the interests of the business, and others are being taken on. It is the survival of the fittest. Self-interest prompts every employer to keep the best, those who can carry a message to Garcia. Have I put the matter too strongly? Possibly I have, but when all the world has gone a-slumming, I wish to speak a word of sympathy for the man who succeeds, the man who against great odds has directed the efforts of others, and having succeeded finds there's nothing in it, nothing but bare board and clothes. My heart goes out to the man who does his work when the boss is away, as well as when he's home, and the man who, when given a letter for Garcia, quietly takes the missive without asking any idiotic questions. I said this was non-politically correct, and with no lurking intention of chucking it into the nearest sewer or of doing aught else but deliver it. Civilization is one long, anxious search for just such individuals. Anything such a man asks will be granted. His kind is so rare that no employer can afford to let him go. He's wanted in every city, town, village, in every office, shop, store, and factory. The world cries out for such. He's needed and needed badly, the man who can carry a message to Garcia. Our world needs more people like Andrew Summers Rowan. Our churches need more Christians who are like Andrew Summers Rowan. And our congregations need more men standing in the pulpits who have embraced a lifestyle like that of Andrew Summers Rowan. The idea that if I'm going to get involved, if I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to do it with excellence. And so my challenge is, embrace excellence. Walk out of here today thinking, I'm going to do everything within my power to make my experience here at Heritage like that of a Rowan. I'm going to embrace excellence. And then allow that to be the standard you embrace in everything. But my final challenge is this. Don't get so caught up in your schoolwork or in your church work that you forget to embrace excellence in your personal walk with God. You remember Matthew chapter 16, verse 26, where Jesus says, or he asks, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? I know it's going to be a great school year. I know you're going to embrace excellence. And I know you're going to be blessed in every class that you sit in here at Heritage. Thank you.